I've been a fan of Stranger Things since season 1, but I've always wondered what a realistic Stranger Things game would look like. So I made one myself. First I quickly gathered a bunch of reference for different parts of the show I wanted to recreate. Then arranged this in Pure Ref, which is really handy as it can always stay on top even if I'm working in another program. I used MetaHuman to try and create a character that looks like Jim Hopper. I think I actually got pretty close, but unfortunately the rimples and small details are much less noticeable in the game, which makes him look younger and in general less like Jim Hopper. I've got a much bigger project I'm working on, so I could only spend about 4 days on this game. I decided to make it small but polished, instead of creating unrealistic goals. He of course needs his revolver, so I made that and then moved on to the holster. This is all pretty simple modeling. I'm also using a subdivision and solidify modifier to make my life a whole lot easier. The shirt from the MetaHuman character was close enough, so all I had to do was adjust the colors and add the patches and badge. Here's Jim Hopper straight out of MetaHuman, and here he is with all the added details. I normally avoid using third-party assets, but in this case, since it's just a small game and I don't have much time, I decided to use as many third-party assets as possible and mostly focus on the programming and Stranger Things specific stuff. Next I made the animations. Luckily he only has 2 states, armed and unarmed. Unfortunately I'm an idiot and I messed up my recording settings, so enjoy Jim Hopper at a whopping 10 frames per second. The environment is next. I used this card to get an idea of where it would be and the scale of the road, but I'm going to change the textures later. The environment still looks like this, so let's add some foliage. Now let's fix this car. Usually I would go into Substance and change the textures, but I'm lazy and that sounds like a lot of work. So I decided to do it all in the material editor. I used the X and Z coordinates to create a color mask and make it look like the car from the series. Finally, some decals for the text on the side and some simple cop lights I modeled in Blender. I also thought Will's bike should be in the ditch next to the road, and after I got the model I made the different materials and added some dirt. As I said, I would normally texture it properly in Substance, but you know. First I was thinking about creating a trail of evidence leading the player to their objective, but in a forest like this it would be almost impossible to actually see this evidence. So instead I just created a path and sculpted the terrain a bit. Now one of my favorite parts, making the gates to the upside down. The base shape is pretty simple and all I had to do after that was cover it with vines. What's really going to make this look cool is the shader in Unreal Engine. First I created the light that looks like it comes from the other side. I noticed red light is something that mostly started appearing in later seasons, and the rest is based on season 1, but creative liberty I guess. I also made the vines pulsate slightly, although in retrospect it might have been a bit too subtle. Another one of my favorite parts, the cutscene. Let's just get one thing out of the way first. I am not an animator, so I tried my best and I'm pretty happy with it, but my standards are incredibly low. I spent about 2 hours making this 5 or 10 second animation. Especially the fall to the upside down was incredibly hard to get anywhere near acceptable. Now we've got a gate to the upside down and an animation, but still no upside down. To get the look of the upside down in the limited time I had, I decided to do a few things. First, change the lighting, fog and color grading, then the materials for just about all surfaces to a shiny dark, so it kinda looks like it's covered in slime. Or at least wet. Slime is hard. And finally, I covered the ground with vines. This was really the finishing touch for me. The Demogorgon is a complex character and I was really running out of time. So I used a great model by user SCP on Sketchfab, link in the description. Then I adjusted the textures, rigged the model and animated it. Walking animations are easy, but as I said, I'm not an animator, so making these running animations with all the momentum took quite some time. Unfortunately, that was still nothing compared to the killing animation. Getting this to look even remotely acceptable was a nightmare, since it has a bunch of momentum and movement, but also interaction with another model. I added these into Unreal Engine and started programming. I won't bore you by explaining what a nightmare it was to get the Demogorgon and player animation to align, but it was not fun. Once again, here's some quality gameplay at 10 frames per second since I'm such a professional. Finally, I made Castle Byers, but in Unreal Engine I really messed up the lighting. I wanted it to be noticeable from a distance, but this made it look worse and my time was running out. So instead of improving it, I'll just pretend it never happened. Before I go, please consider subscribing as I would really appreciate it and there's still a lot to come.